much of the ministry of Jesus centered around food. And it gets us to ask the question, what if church planting could look similar to that? Well, Mark and Mary Kreiderman began to wrestle with those ideas and began to answer that question through an idea called dinner church.
So let me tell you, Mark Kreiderman grew up as a Free Methodist pastor's kid, and he's a leader in the Free Methodist denomination in Michigan. He's been part of thriving churches. He's led and pastored growing churches, and through his ministry, many people came to Christ. But both Mark and Mary in Detroit were sensing a problem. They realized there were so many people who were not connecting with the local churches. And so they decided, you know what? Let's bring the church to them. And they decided to use a form, dinner church, to multiply churches in every neighborhood in Detroit. And they launched their first dinner church, but they quickly ran into a problem. They were stuck. They weren't able to multiply. They didn't have a pipeline for raising up and sending out new church planters.
And so by the providential hand of God, Mark and Mary connected with CDN and were introduced to the simple kingdom concept of the multiplication flywheel. Encounter weekends followed by discipleship into the depth of their calling. And so they took this idea of reaching their neighbors around a simple meal and their desire for deep discipleship and the practice they had already begun exploring with dinner churches. And the Lord began to open a door for them to see this movement multiply. And that's exactly what the Lord did.
It's incredible. So they hosted an encounter weekend and they started a hub for church multiplication. And let me tell you, dinner churches are multiplying throughout Detroit and even broader. Now Mark and Mary are seeing new churches planted. They're replicating it and using a mentorship program called Shepherd's Pie in between these encounter weekends where God is calling people into the ministry. Mark is mentoring them and discipling them into their depth of their calling. Mark and Mary are now CDN catalysts and trainers and are multiplying churches and training centers throughout cities and even around the world.
So support church planners, creative church planners like Mark and Mary Kreiderman through your partnership with CDN. And let me tell you a couple ways to do just that. One, join us for Launchpad Prayer. We meet every month over Zoom. It's a global gathering of kingdom leaders. We would love for you to be there. Two, give generously to the work. When you give, it helps multiply the impact and provides more training and opportunities for people to take bold steps of faith. And three, if you're a leader, a pastor, a ministry leader in one form or another, host an encounter weekend. Bring your people to encounter weekends. If God's calling you to be a multiplication center, we can help you launch a CDN training center right in the heart of your ministry, and you can see explosive growth as well. So we would love to continue partnering with you in this work, and we're so grateful for stories like Mark and Mary, where their faithfulness is on display.
Amen.
And so we're asking you to join us in a movement of planting churches in creative spaces and places in big cities and in rural communities and in all places all around the world.
Amen.
And so we know that we're better together because together we plant churches.